Welcome to Home's Room. Just like homeroom, we start off our day getting together with our homies, swapping stories, even a little kiss and tell action. This podcast contains language not suitable for younger listeners, topics about sex and mental health. Discretion is advised. Our views are our own. Let class begin. Welcome back to another episode of Home's Room. I am joined by my co-host, Caitlin, and I just want to say we just started doing a new thing where our intro plays like live for us right before, and like Kinsey said in his interview, like, I don't know, man, I just love big beats, and like the bass drop in that, it's just so much, I forget about it because I hear it, but I don't hear it as often. So like we were talking about one episode like forever ago, we need a pump up song or something to play like before we get on, and now we have it, and it's like I'm not mad at it. So thank you, Kinsey. Thank you.
It's so chill and I love it. It's so fitting for what you're trying to build here. So I love it.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. I have a very I guess I don't want to say a strong episode, but a very like unlike normal Home's Room episodes where we're tackling a little bit of a heavier topic, and with that I have like probably, you know, one of those, your friend is like considered an expert to you because they know more than you, even though neither one of you are necessarily experts in a thing. So I got my friend who's more of an expert than I am on this topic, and we have two completely different perspectives on two opposite ends of the process. But in our timeline, the shooting at the Kansas City Super Bowl parade just happened last week, and I thought about this as an episode that would, you know, fit with what's going on currently, but be hopefully far enough down the road and not another shooting just having happened to where it's not having this conversation so close proximity to a shooting, because to me that's never the time to be like gun control or we need to do this or we need to do that. And that's also not what this episode is going to specifically be. It's just situations that happen, and realize that like there's human involvement in all of these steps, hopefully, because there's human involvement in every step of this process. But we'll get to that later. How are you, Caitlin?
I'm hanging in there, Matt. I'm getting used and abused and bullied by these damn kids. Our recent drama over the last weekend was my husband said my 1.5-year-old needed a haircut. I said, all right, just don't scalp him. Do what you need to do. Take him to sports cuts or sports clips. I thought that's what he was going to do. Nope. Went to Target, bought he bought trimmer. He bought clippers.
I love it.
He used the longest guard that came with the set. And what happened? My child is scalped.
Did he go up or did he go down?
I don't know what he did, homie. I just walked in the kitchen and I saw my beautiful son's golden locks all on the fucking floor. And I'm so distraught that I am like, let me tell you, there are very few emotional triggers in motherhood that I've actually been able to find that like bother me. This is one. Okay. I took my son to Sports Clips to get his very first trim, and it was this nice lady, and she just like trimmed his hair up because it was like getting in his eyes. She ended up nicking the back of his ear, and it was very emotional for all of us. And I told my husband, you are the one that's in charge of haircuts now, because this was scarring and triggering for me. I don't want to do it anymore. He said, all right, fine, I'll do it. Again, I said, just don't scalp him. And now my son looks like he would be getting formal dinner invites in 1940s Germany. My son looks like he would strap some firecrackers to a bunny and light him just to see what the fuck would happen. He looks like he throws rocks off of highway overpasses just to see, you know, and it's very difficult for me. My husband called me today and he was like, hey, you still mad at me? And I said, hey, are those clippers in the fucking trash? And is his hair grown back yet? But other than that, Matt.
So for the record, I cut my own hair.
Okay.
So like my assumption is he just went he went against the grain of your son's hair, so the guard didn't do as much as it was supposed to do. Um, but also that's unfortunate. And it
It
is hair; it does grow back. But uh, judging by
does
your
that make me
hair,
feel better when
yeah, I
my
was saying, yeah,
husband says that to me?
yeah,
No.
I was gonna say, but judging by your hair, it is definitely a thing that you are like. It is attached to you. We'll just say that, pun intended. And
I have
you,
told my mother-in-law, my sisters-in-law, and I'm now telling all of our homes room listeners and you, Matt, my homie, if my husband tells me one more time it's just hair, it'll grow back, I'm going to physically assault him. It really is just so, I'm just so distraught that all of he had beautiful golden hair. Just hard
so
times in the Uding home, Matt.
I'm gonna make you feel even better, and
Oh God.
I'm saying that like sarcastically. So as you know, I've been going to practice every once in a while, and I decided to go. Courtney was like, "I think the last half of our practice is a scrimmage," and I was like, "Okay, that's fine. Whatever. I'll just do the first half. Like whatever. It's not a big deal." And we get there, and I was like, "Damn, there's a lot of cars in the parking lot for like a split scrimmage later, or was somebody already here?" And she didn't say anything. She made it seem like somebody was already just like another team had already been practicing. And mind you, this is at like 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. So an earlier practice than that is a really early fucking practice. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. And it was like, oh, I guess we're scrimmaging the whole time. So I was like, I'll just sit out or I'll ref or do something else. And then the the team that was scrimmaging had almost enough people for 2 full lines, which means they had 9 people. I would have been the 10th. You have 5 on the track at any one time. So 2 full lines is like ideal in that situation because it was a practice to get her team ready for their game this coming Saturday. And they were just having like a tune-up scrimmage against another team, another mashup group, just to give them somebody to play against. And they were like, "Hey, do you want to do it anyway?" And I was like, "Well, I wasn't planning on it, and also I haven't signed a waiver, and I haven't passed my skills because I'm retired. So if you say so, leader of the league, you're the one taking responsibility."
Oh Lord.
And I got tripped, and it was my outside foot as I was getting ready to transfer weight from my inside to my outside foot. So like think of running up the stairs, and that foot you're about to put down on the stairs catches the other stair. So like you just fall with no way to really like catch yourself. It was like that, except around a corner. So I slid my feet out from under me going left to right. So I slid my arm across the ground, and I have like rink rash slash like what you would normally consider like rug burn across my
Mm-hmm.
arm and my hip. So I've already gotten a little injured, and I haven't really been doing it. And you keep telling me I'm just gonna come on here and you're gonna have a cast or you're gonna be
You're gonna
broken.
be in a neck brace one episode,
Yeah,
Matt. Damn
yeah.
it.
So I just wanted to say that. Oh yeah, I see that.
It's just very odd that you mentioned physical injuries. I ate shit in a parking lot, stone cold sober. So if you can't see, if you're not watching the video podcast, my entire knee is just covered in an ugly bruise, and I have this fun
I
open
saw that
wound
when
on my hand.
you reached for the camera earlier, and I was like, "Is that a
Yep.
ring or is that a cut?" I can't tell. It looked
No.
broken. Yeah.
It's yeah. We're falling apart here at Holmes Room, pals.
Apparently, we need the sun to come back consistently and to be warm, and we'll be better. That's how it works, right? Anyway, none of that has anything to do with the episode that we're recording. We started it off on a slightly light note, even though it was like a dreadfully light note, I guess, for some of us. But we're talking about gun sales, and specifically straw sales and gun purchases. And I think that this is something that doesn't get talked about enough in the conversation of gun control, gun rights, and like the shootings that are happening, because a lot of the weapons have been purchased legally, and whether that be legally to the letter of the law or legally to the fact that like somebody passed a background check, received this gun, and then proceeded to do unlawful things with them. And that's where it kind of gets like a little in the weeds and tricky. But we have somebody who is an analyst about stuff like that. And I used to be an FFL, or for layman's terms, I sold firearms through a company. So we have two opposite sides, but hopefully that'll give us a better snapshot and a good conversation about this topic, and maybe some stuff for you to think about as a person being bombarded, I would assume, when this episode drops right now with they're going to take your guns, gun control. They're going to take your guns, gun control, in this whole election situation, because there's more to it than just that. So bear that in mind. So
absolutely. Which, first and foremost, I'm super pumped that this is, I kind of figured that's where your head was at with the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade and the shooting that occurred earlier last week. Not only do I know personally some of the first responders that showed up on scene, I also had my husband's aunt and uncle who are diehard Chiefs fans who I knew were probably going to be at that parade. So once my group supervisor sent out the text that a shooting had occurred, I started sending her texts, Aunt Lori. She wasn't responding, so I called her, and immediately she picked up and was like, "We're safe. We were on the complete other end of the parade. I don't even know what happened. We're safe." So then I send out the group message to everybody that talked to Aunt Lori. They're good. But I tried, honestly, Matt, to find some stats about mass shootings in the United States.
Well, hold on. I just wanted to point out,
fine.
like, as close as you were, Crown Center, which is like where the parade terminated. That's where they like finished the parade. There's a big stage, all that kind of stuff. There's DJ on stage. Crown Center, the week prior, I was on a field trip with the school that I'm with there. So Courtney works close enough that she brought me coffee. So she was within the distance that we were like, maybe they won't even have work today because it'll be a nightmare for her to get around. And she was the one that sent me a text message saying there was a shooting and this happened. And she was like, "I'm safe. I'm good. There's just traffic now backed up down our road because they're diverting traffic around." So it was definitely one of those days where it was like, man, that was super close. And with shootings in Walmarts and shootings at, football games for teenagers and, school shootings, it's becoming increasingly harder to find somebody that hasn't been touched by this. Mm-hmm. And hearing our local radio DJs who were there covering the event and being a part of the fanfare to then have to cover it in a completely different way, for all of them it was a shock that they had to like realize I might not be here because I was at that place, and our country is suffering from that. So that's a thing that we like definitely cannot take lightly, and we have to understand, regardless of which side you are on as far as gun control or not gun control, that's not the point of this conversation. All of us could be touched by gun violence as easy as we step out of our house. So,
well, specific to mass shootings, it's almost a weekly occurrence here in the United States, especially in the last couple of years, where you see the news coverage of a mass shooting. But there was one in Boulder, Colorado, at a grocery store where my sister was living and had gotten groceries from that grocery store before. There was one in Texas, which was a neighboring high school that my niece goes to high school a couple of years ago. There's one here in Kansas City. There was a school shooting at a school in St. Louis just last year that I know people that responded to that school. So, it's really fucking unfortunate. And I feel like, I don't know what your thoughts are about this specifically, but it's almost a moment of hesitation where I'm like, do I really want to send my kids to a public school when these are the situations and this is what's hitting the news, news headlines? But also understanding that statistically, How often are these things actually occurring? Does the media over sensationalize them? Is there a particular trend in states where these things are happening? I don't know. All I know is that as a parent and as somebody that helps investigate these types of crimes, it takes one person at the same school that my kids go to cause mass chaos and really just emotional trauma that kids have to deal with. So again, very timely topic, but we are specifically talking about straw purchasing. What is straw purchasing, Matt?
So from my end, a straw purchase is specifically, let me see, I got to find my note. I have a article that I pulled, and a straw purchase as defined by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives involves someone who purchases a gun for someone else who is prohibited by law from purchasing one, or for somebody who does not want their name associated with the transaction. Straw purchases are deemed a federal crime punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. Federally licensed firearm dealers, or FFLs, which is what I was, are required to perform background checks for those seeking to buy firearms. Licensed dealers also required under federal law to maintain their records of the gun sales and make them available to law enforcement for inspection. All of that to say, if somebody comes in to buy a firearm and it is not for them, it is for even their wife potentially. If it's not for the person that is standing in front of you handing an ID to you, technically it could be considered a straw sale because it's not for the person purchasing the firearm. And where, again, it gets in kind of the weeds is if it's a gift for a husband, we would recommend a gift card and have them come back to purchase it because we are responsible for selling that firearm to you. So it's got to be the person who matches the ID on the paperwork. Long story short. But from your end, how do you feel a straw purchase should be described?
I think intent is so much of straw purchasing.
Yeah.
If it is, full transparency, my husband bought me an AR for Christmas the year that my dad died. And I was so excited. I sent a message out to the guys that I work with who are all ATF agents. And I was like, my husband bought me an AR for Christmas. I can't wait to go sight it in. And all of them were like, bitch, did you just admit to straw purchasing on a group message with active federal agents? I was like, no, that's not what I mean. So, two big terms with straw purchasing are purchaser and possessor.
Correct.
The purchaser of the firearm in question should also be the possessor of said weapon to avoid any type of gray area or issues with straw purchasing. Specific to straw purchasing, what I care about as a contractor that helps investigate these types of crimes is someone who has no criminal history, who is purchasing a firearm for someone who is a prohibited person. That means that is an individual who is currently under federal indictment. If you are indicted federally, you are prohibited from purchasing or possessing any new firearms. That means somebody, depending on the state, who has been convicted of a domestic violence charge or a felon, any type of felon. Any felons who are actually convicted are prohibited persons in the United States. If you are stereotypically, what we see are female associates of said felons who come in and purchase a firearm, and immediately when they leave the gun store, or maybe not even immediately, they hand over that weapon to someone who is prohibited, where that person who is prohibited, if they try to go into a gun store and legally purchase a firearm, they would be denied because they are a felon. They are under federal indictment. What all these other things? They're a prohibited person. Every single person who purchases a firearm legally from an FFL, which is what you used to be, Matt, fills out this fun form called a 4473.
Well, hold
Matt,
on.
what?
Before we get there,
Sorry.
you were gonna bring up some stats, and I have some stats that I wanted to bring up. So let's do that first. We defined what a straw sale was, but we'll get into what point of sale looks like before we get into some of my fun stories of things that I've had to like witness on both good and bad sides. But did you pull up any stats?
I found just one specific stat about straw purchasing in the United States, and that it is estimated that out of all gun sales in the United States per any calendar year, there are over 30,000 straw purchases that are attempted or successful. That's a lot of guns.
That is.
What I also, as a social scientist, somebody that has all of my education in studying humans and human behavior, I wish there were more actual stats and research done about straw purchases.
Yeah.
Because when you Google straw purchases, you just see a bunch of DOJ, Department of Justice press releases of people who have been charged and convicted of straw purchasing. You know, I wish there was a larger research or a larger scientific study done about straw purchasing so that, you know, we had greater stats or we had better stats readily available.
I agree with that. I think that it's like I said, this is why we're having this conversation, because it's not talked about enough. And I think maybe some of these purchases being cut down on might help. We might not see, but as long as that data is not being collected, we'd never know. So it needs to be talked about. It needs to be brought up. I looked up a stat, and this is the stat that like directly related to me in the time frame that I am pulling some of these stories from. Under COVID, I switched jobs. That was when I stopped being an FFL for completely different reasons than like being an FFL. I actually enjoyed that job a lot, no matter how stressful it was, depending on the day. But in what blew my mind was right at the start of COVID. So talking early 2020, there was a spike of the world is going crazy. And I started noticing, man, we're selling like I had one of the biggest gun walls for our retailer in the area. And nobody at the time was doing more sales than I was. And we had hit a slow spot where we weren't doing very many sales at all. So I would talk to the other FFLs and we'd be like, yeah, no, we haven't really sold much. We would do, weekly, daily counts on what firearms we had. And I started coming in to do my morning count. And I was like, man, we sold another gun last night. Oh man, we sold another weapon. And it started to become like, man, like this is like 5 or 6. So the stat I looked up is the sale spike in 2020, and the gun purchases accelerated in the U.S. during 2020 and 2021 compared to 2019, with more than 5 million adults becoming first-time gun owners between January 2020 and April 2021, compared to that same time frame of just 2.4 million adults in 2019. So that was a huge, huge spike. And the fact that happened, I remember doing the research, and I was an FFL, so I tried to keep up with gun manufacturing and like inventory and all that kind of stuff. And they said that gun sales for the first 3 weeks of COVID spiked, I think it was like 300%, because everybody was afraid. And what that led to was a lot of creepy, unsure sales, but like, it's a first time gun owner. Should I not? Should I? Are you going to be? And there's a line that you have to cross that says, I, in good conscience, cannot go through with the sale, so I can deny you at the store level, or I could put you to background in hopes that they find something. But you have to make a decision in that moment as an FFL, whether this is a straw sale or whether this is a sale to somebody that does not seem like they should legally purchase this firearm for whatever reason. And you are like, I went through maybe 3 or 4 hours of training on just how to decide that thing as part of my training overall. So like that was a big chunk of my training, that like the paperwork side of it, I feel like I had less training on than how to decide with integrity to sell this firearm or not. And I think that says a lot about how seriously FFL should take their job, but also how seriously FFL should take straw sales. So that spike in gun sales was crazy to me, and it made me work for my money. That is for sure. So what does that number tell you? Do you feel like you on your end that translates to anything useful?
Maybe not anything useful, but ATF has a national tracing center, and it is housed in West Virginia. I actually, as part of a work conference, got a tour of the facility. So what happens is every set number of years, or when an FFL permanently closes its doors, every single paper file of their 4473s, which is the form that every person has to fill out to legally purchase a firearm from an FFL, it gets sent to this facility in West Virginia. So for me as an investigator, it is super helpful because what happens is, hypothetically, you have a known felon who is stopped during a traffic stop. A firearm is recovered from inside the vehicle. Is a Glock with a switch on it. I get that report. I look up the specifics of the firearm. I enter the make, model, serial number, and all of the recovery details. This is the individual that this firearm was recovered off of. That information gets sent to this huge facility in West Virginia, and they actually go through boxes and boxes and boxes of paper 4473s to tell me who the original purchaser of that firearm is. This facility in West Virginia, it is massive. It is a huge warehouse, and it is just boxes and boxes and rows and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of 4473 forms from FFLs. And if it's not enough to demonstrate how many boxes are, on top of all of those boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes are inside the facility, there are 30 plus shipping containers out in the parking lot full of boxes of 4473s.
My back room was 3 top shelves that probably were like maybe 20-ish yards like in length. I said yards because most of you watch football, I would assume, so you could like compute that into something. So like 20-ish yards, 2 first downs of space across the top shelf, the second from the top shelf, and then my back shelf, which housed all of my boxed firearms. There was probably 2 or 3 stacks deep of paperwork because you have to keep all that stuff on file. And the last thing you want is ATF rolling through your, which I've seen happen, ATF rolling in and being like, we need January of XYZ year, and you can't produce it because that sucks. Or the one that you thought you didn't need as accessible as you thought you needed, or you thought you were up on time for not having it. So but 4473s, that is it's usually done in an electronic form now, so you might not even realize you're filling out like an actual like form, except for like you're just doing boxes like text boxes on a screen. But used to be a paper version. 4473 gets all your information, the serial number, all of the manufacturing information is recorded, and then from that point it gets sent off to NICS. And NICS is the company or entity, I guess. I don't even know what you would call it, but
it is the FBI, Matt.
Yeah, it's the FBI. They are the background check. FBI. I was looking for the word for that particular.
They are the FBI.
Yeah, but they've been around since 1998, like doing all of those, integral background checky things. And from what I have experienced in gun sales, both on the customer side and the sales side, it has gotten a lot better and faster than it used to be. And that doesn't mean that they're missing stuff, because people still come up denied. People still come up with flags and holds and slows and things like that. And it just has to be like streamlined because it's probably easier for them to get all of them instead of backlogged. But yeah, they have since like their launch have done more than 300 million checks and more than 1.5 million denials. So that's good numbers for them doing their job. That's something that like we again have to pay attention to. And as we were talking about straw sales, how many of those sales of those 300 that they actually like saw were already weeded out by an FFL saying, you know what, this doesn't seem right, I'm not going to. And that's why that has to be part of the conversation as well. So
NICS is an acronym, which I tell everybody, anybody who's younger than me that starts in law enforcement, I tell them, if an acronym is said in front of you and you have no idea what it means, do not be scared to stop the conversation and ask, what does this mean? What are you saying? So NICS, NICS, stands for National Instant Criminal Background Check System. A NICS denial means what happens is a 4473 form is filled out. It is sent off into the abyss of the internet. And then a couple days later, typically 3 business days, if not sooner, the FBI says you can either approve or deny this gun purchase. I'm thankful for this conversation because I have really weird nuances specific to gun purchases in Illinois.
Yeah.
But I just recently had a NICS denial for a known felon. He attempted to purchase a firearm and he attempted to purchase it on a Friday. And then the 4473 and his criminal history were sent to FBI. A NICS denial was done. And then the NICS denial was turned around and given back to the FFL on a different calendar date. So it involves a bunch of math.
Yeah.
It involves some math because Monday was a federal holiday. The FFL was closed. So what can happen hypothetically is the 4473 is sent off. There's no denial that's given. The purchase is approved by the FFL. The gun is turned over to that individual who's trying to purchase a firearm. And then days later, they get back the denial through the NICS, through the FBI criminal history check, at which point that FFL has an obligation to turn around and tell ATF, hey, we gave this guy a gun. Yeah. I say guy, but stereotypically, we gave this person a gun and then days later got a rejection from FBI because FBI doesn't move very quickly. There's a certain, number of business days that process happens, at which point it is assigned to an ATF agent and it is assigned as a NICS retrieval, meaning that ATF agent has to go out into the world and go find that person and retrieve that gun and say, why'd you try to purchase this gun? You knew that you were a felon or, this, that, whatever. It's a whole other leg of it. But here in Illinois, it's currently the National Rifle Association, the NRA, is suing the state of Illinois. Go figure. There is a thing called a FOID card. Do you know what a FOID card is, Matt?
I know I've heard of it, but I've never had to deal with one.
So a FOID card is a separate license that all firearms, all people have to get in the state of Illinois if you want to purchase a gun from the state of Illinois. What I can do as somebody who investigates straw purchasers is I can submit an FTIP, meaning I can ask with probable cause to believe that somebody is a straw purchaser, which pause for the cause because I have lots to say about that. There are certain indicators about what might be a straw purchaser. I say I have reasonable suspicion to believe that this individual is involved in straw purchasing. I pull their FOID card. I ask the Illinois State Police, hey, can you please run their FTIP history for me? An FTIP history is every single time that person's criminal history has been submitted as part of a 4473 from an Illinois FFL to ISP. Can you tell why I tell all my younger cohorts to stop a conversation when an acronym is said that you maybe don't understand? Do you know how many acronyms? It's almost a daily challenge. How many fucking acronyms can I work into a sentence? But anyways, I ask ISP to give me a history of every single time that this FOID card holder's criminal history was submitted to them as part of a gun purchase attempt, and whether it was approved or denied. And they can give me back a whole spreadsheet of not only every single purchase that was attempted, but every single purchase that was approved, and also specifically down to whether it was a multiple sale or it was just a single sale of a handgun or a rifle. NRA doesn't like that. They say that ISP is making a database of gun owners and all this other stuff. Politicians in Illinois say it is just another degree of accountability to gun purchasers to make sure that these sales are legitimate. I, as an investigator, I'm just glad that I have this tool belt on me, and this is just another thing I can grab on this tool belt of somebody that I know or I suspect is involved in straw purchasing. But also there's hypothetically, a straw purchaser has purchased 12 guns in the last calendar year. 6 of them have been recovered by law enforcement from felons in the course of a crime. There's 6 other guns out there outstanding that we don't believe that this person who straw purchased them has them on their person, and they're just out in the world waiting to be used in the commission of a crime. So it gets very hairy, and it gets very, it's a very polarizing topic, obviously, but I'm very interested to, one, hear your stories as an FFL, Matt, but also get your take on a certain court precedent that was set just in the last week in Southern Illinois. So where do you want to go from here?
Well, we're running out of time.
Sorry.
So I'm going to try and burn through a lot of this really quickly so that we can get to everything. But first, point of sale on my end. So you have Caitlin, who kind of is on the back end of things in a different manner, and I was on the point of sale side. So customer comes in, is looking at firearms, is like, hey, I decide I want this shotgun. They start, the paperwork process. I get their ID. It would go at that point in time. It would go in my name badge. So they never walked away with their ID. If anything happened, I always had their ID on me. So they couldn't just leave without knowing exactly who they were. So if I had to call law enforcement, I knew who they were. I didn't, hand them back their thing until the sale was over. Plus I need to enter their information like 6 different times. And I don't want to have to be like, hey, can I get that back? Because that was annoying. But once they fill out the 4473, there's 2 steps in it that are specifically for me. And one is I have to go to essentially putting in my information, attaching myself to the gun sale. But then I have to decide, am I going to push this through to be looked at by NICS, or am I going to deny them at the store level because something seems off? And at that point in time, I have to make sure everything that I've done up till that point is above board, and this person is who they say they are. I double check their name. I double check, that they match the person. I make sure that there's not another person that had been skulking around, maybe with them, maybe not with them, because that's the thing I have to look for. And then I push through to background, and then we wait. And in some states, you have to wait longer than others. We had a pretty instant thing. It took like maybe 5-10 minutes to get background back.
Was this also in the state of Kansas?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And it just becomes a situation where at that point, while we're waiting, they kind of can walk around the store. I take the firearm in the back, disassemble it, and then put it in find its like original packaging, put it back in its original packaging. And then, or I've get the one that is still in the box, because a lot of times we just had one that was a display and then there was one in the back that had a box. So we use that one, all the serial numbers and everything we take off of that particular one. And then we get their response. And sometimes we got a response of delay, sometimes we got a response of deny, and sometimes we got a response of proceed. And then the paperwork gets finalized in whichever direction it needed to get into, except for when it's a delay. When it's a delay, that's when it gets fun, and I have a story about that. But yeah, so in the end, there's a bunch of steps that have to happen at the point of sale, and it's being made out to seem like those steps aren't being followed or those steps don't exist, and that's not necessarily the case in all times. Yes, there is the like gun show loophole where there's a little bit of, and that is its own thing. And I've never worked at a gun show. I've never purchased a firearm at a gun show, so I don't have any opinion on that because I just don't. However, in this particular situation, it's a lot of things that we went through, and this is where my stories come in. You just got walked through a really quick gun sale. Sorry. But the first one,
so excited, man. Go ahead.
This husband came in, and I always kept track of whatever guns I had on my wall and whatever guns were in the back, whatever guns were on hold, because I got a weekly call from Nick's saying, hey, we have a serial number tied up here. What is it? Or, hey, you had X number of sales. Is this correct? And it was
really
annoying. Yeah, it was annoying. And I had
weekly calls from Nick's.
And it was basically like an audit of what we sold, and like I assume because we sold more than most stores, they verified us as opposed to verifying all of the chain stores in our area. So like whatever, I didn't care because I could do it, but it was also annoying because it took like 30 minutes out of my day that I didn't really want to sit on the phone in my like hot ass gun room, because it was terrible. But if you're like like bullshitting back there, yeah, that's one thing. But being on the phone back there is like, I don't wanna. But yeah, so this guy comes in, and I didn't know him by face because I'd never seen him before. And he's walking around, he's, talking to his wife. His wife points at a shotgun on my wall. It's a like duck hunting shotgun. It's like, okay, whatever, fine. And it's not abnormal that women go hunting, so I don't like whatever. But he came in at a time where we were decently busy, and that was like always a weird thing to me. When somebody comes in with a ton of specific questions and the gun counter is really busy, it's like, I'm going to pay special attention to you because I've never seen you before. So wherever you got your information, you've either been here before or something might not be right. And she walked around our store, disappeared, and he, did everything anybody that looks at a gun does, and was like, yeah, let me go get her. And then she came back and she was like, that's the one I want, right? And he said, yeah, that's the one you want. I think that one's perfect. And then I was like, what's interesting about this gun? Because I'm pretty sure I already have one tied up with another 4473 on my hold shelf, and I don't know who it belongs to, but I'm going to go check that out. And sure enough, last names match. And he was in a denial, and it was tied up because it was a denial that required, I assume, whatever you do, to find out whether he had to get more pressing things done as a individual in the United States under law. Because I've never had a hold last that long on one person that came back denial but still said hold. So everything had to be frozen. So we couldn't sell that firearm because it was still tied to his 4473 that we couldn't dismiss. And I can't remember what it's called. There's a specific term for it where like once that denial comes through, you can essentially like void the paperwork, and it releases that firearm serial number from that paperwork, so you can sell it on the retailer side. But yeah, either way. So
the wife picked out the shotgun that she wanted.
Negative. I'm getting there. I was going through the other side of it.
Go ahead.
So I looked at the paperwork. His name is on the first gun sale. Her name is about to be on the second gun sale. So she, as you said before, wifey came in to try and buy this firearm. So now I have two firearms tied up with this same sale that are the exact same thing because he couldn't get it. that one sucked because that guy raised hell for 3 weeks because he didn't understand. And when you get a delay, there's literally, I can't tell you shit. I
Yep.
have no words for you at all. I have to hand you a slip of paper and say, reach out to these people. That's what you got. Cause that's all, that's the only thing I can say. Call this number, email these people. It's beyond me at this
I
point. Sorry.
always wondered on the FFL side of things, if you have a denial that's completely out of your control, but like you have to be the face of that message.
I got a story for that too.
Please, man. I'm so happy that you're sharing these. Go ahead.
Right, so that gun sale was annoying, and I never saw that guy again. We finally got rid of that. That took 2 months to finally settle everything and to get those firearms off of those holds. But then we had another guy who came in, and let me tell you this. You ever have a person that comes up and starts telling you all their life details, and you're like, okay, please stop talking because you haven't said anything yet that's going to fuck you over, but like you're trying to impress me or like make sure that I know you know what you're talking about in some sort of fashion, and you're walking a very, very razor thin line. So this guy, he was talking about ammo, he was talking about hunting, he was talking about random stuff, but was buying a home defense shotgun. And I was like, hey man, you're not going to go hunting with this like 10-inch barrel. Like that's not what this is, like the shortest shotgun that you could possibly buy. And I don't believe that it's going to serve you well for hunting. There's no choke on it whatsoever. So like, it's not a hunting shotgun. He's like, yeah, I know. And then continues to talk about hunting and how he's this and how he's that. And then he mentioned one weird thing, and it was along the lines of which rounds are better for, let's say meat. And I was like, what do you mean by meat? Like, do you mean like to harvest meat so that you don't have as many pellets in it? Or, and he was like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God. So at that point, I had to store deny him because I didn't trust that he was buying this firearm for the right reasons. And then he comes back with a buddy, and his buddy gets denied immediately, as the fastest denial I've ever seen.
From Nick's?
Yes, immediately. Like usually it's like I said, it's like 5-10 minutes before it comes back. This shit was like 35 seconds. I put my pen down, walked in the back, came back out, and the shit said denied. And I was like,
FBI said not only no, but fuck no.
Exactly. And what that ended up being was like, I had to explain to him, hey man, they denied you. I can't go forward with the sale, unfortunately. And he was like, well, that's bullshit. All my stuff is right. And I was like, yeah, I'm not saying it's wrong. They denied you. I don't know why. All I can do is give you this piece of paper. And if you want to petition it, you can. Information's here. I'm outside of it. So he starts throwing a fit to the point where like, I'm not a person that's afraid of anybody. If you're going to throw hands, I'm whatever. It's what it is. I wasn't concerned with that. And there's a glass, like a counter between us. So in the end, like the worst he's going to do is like knock my computer off the counter or like knock my cup of pens over or whatever. Like, I don't really care. And dude just starts going ballistic about how he's getting denied and this, that, and the other thing. And I was like, yeah, man, I mean, if you have any felonies or anything like that, like that's usually what it is. But also like for me, I had my identity stolen when I was younger. So I always get like a slow process where like sometimes it takes longer, or sometimes they'll even delay me for a day or two before I can like pick it up, because they have to verify that my address and my history that I've entered is in track with me and not this other identity that happened when I was like 16 or 15 or something like that, and they stole my identity. So like it's just a thing. And he was like, man, this shit better not have to be because of my baby mama and not paying child support. And I was like, god damn it, it might actually technically that would put you in that. And dude was like, really? It's like, yep, it is a thing, and if you don't pay, technically you fall under that category. And he was like, so if I get that cleared up, I can buy a gun? And I was like, maybe. You can get out of my store now though. So that sucked.
Maybe.
Exactly. Maybe. So that was the creepy guy that just kept talking and then brought somebody even worse to buy a firearm. So those two sales got denied and were straw purchases that I knew were happening. And only thing I could do was trust that like this wasn't the situation. I had to follow the process that I was given, and there you go. That particular straw sale, I couldn't say for sure he was buying it for that other guy. Maybe the other guy was or wasn't. Maybe they were homies and that's what was going to happen. They didn't act like it. He never came to the counter. He never treated it like it was for him. They were both in there looking at guns the last time they were in there, and he also was interested in it, but said he didn't have necessarily the money to spend on it. So like I, as a person, I couldn't assume in that situation. This other situation is probably the worst one that I had to deal with, and it's unfortunate because they did everything right and it wasn't their own fault. They got fucked over on a technicality by the store because somebody hit the wrong button, and it made it so that they had to fight for their ability to purchase firearms.
My heart already hurts.
They're forward.
With that,
so, yeah.
with that,
so
the way you're structuring the story, Matt, my heart already hurts.
This couple came in. We had, I wish I could remember what the manufacturer was, but it was an American flag motif rifle, competition precision shooting rifle, long distance. It was chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor, which is like a long distance, like really, really, really well designed round for target shooting or for hunting or whatever you want at distance.
Yep.
So they had just come back from Colorado. They were I think passing through because they lived on the other side of us or something, and we can sell firearms if it's touching, I believe was the way that worked. Yeah, so Colorado, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, but nobody else. If you have an ID, we can it would process the paperwork the same way because you were a neighboring state, and gun laws in Kansas were weird that way. But they went to go purchase this firearm, and I walked away because I don't have to deal with every sale that way. I actually sometimes have to sign off and be the person that like signs off on the gun sale secondary and confirming everything is right. So I actually should walk away to make sure that I'm a fresh set of eyes. So I came back and they were pissed off. And I was like, what happened? And they're like, we got denied. And I was like, have you been? And I was like, maybe it was your address or maybe it was something weird because they seemed everything above board. Went to go find out they were competition shooters and have a ton of like trophies and things, and were buying a congratulatory rifle for his wife who just won a contest in Colorado. And what happened was
really sad.
Somebody hit store deny, and it flagged them in the system. So when they went to go redo the paperwork, it instantly locked them out of being able to purchase a firearm because of it. And it was like, that wasn't a straw sale. It was a husband trying to like surprise his wife, and like he was buying it for her in the same situation that you mentioned earlier where your husband was. So context definitely does matter. It was super unfortunate. Because it just was. I have other stories, but we're short on time, so I won't.
No, this is great.
Currently,
can we finish on me getting your perspective on this very timely court precedent that was set in Southern Illinois, if possible? All right, so I read a lot of dumb shit as part of my job daily, in and out. Towards the tail end of last week, my group supervisor, my RAC, the resident agent in charge of the criminal enforcement group of the ATF that I...
Acronym.
So many acronyms, dude. Please never stop. Don't ever be scared to stop a conversation, whether you're in law enforcement or not. Say, I don't know what that acronym means, because 9 times out of 10, maybe not 9 times out of 10, I have so many... Matt, I just randomly had this conversation with my sister too. Super weird. I was like, I told my sister, who's a prosecutor in the county that I live in, I was like, you have to stop those conversations and ask what that acronym is, because so many grown men that I work with will just like nod their heads and be like, yeah, I totally know what you're talking about. because they don't want to give the illusion that they don't know everything. Or
okay, number one, don't ever enter a situation like that. I've been told more times they were happy that I told them I don't know what I'm talking about,
yes,
and I will go find somebody that does, or I
Mhm.
didn't understand and let them explain it to me, because they then know that I'm not going to lead them astray with some false bullshit. But anyway, continue your point and precedent on this case before we run out of time.
Sorry, okay. So I read really dumb shit every single day as part of my job. And close of business Thursday night, our rack sends out a link to our group chat saying that it was a link to a news story. This news story I currently have pulled up in front of me, and I just want your perspective as a former FFL, Matt. In the Southern District of Illinois, there is a county. It's called St. Clair County. It is one of the largest counties in Southern Illinois. It includes East St. Louis, Belleville, a lot of the Metro East from St. Louis. It's a pretty big county. There was a U.S. district judge who concluded, as part of an appeal that a felon gave, that the law preventing felons from possessing a firearm is unconstitutional, citing that the same precedent that gun owners rely upon in their constitutional challenges to the state's ban on so-called assault weapons. Out of nowhere, there was a U.S. district judge out of St. Clair County, Illinois, who actually sided with a felon who pushed forward this appeal of their conviction and said, actually, I believe that felons should be able to possess firearms, and the fact that felons can't possess firearms is unconstitutional. She said in her decision, this court is well aware of the gun violence epidemic in our community and in our country at large, and the risks imposed by allowing potentially dangerous individuals to be armed. That said, it is persuaded to adherence to the other court precedents that proper historical analog must be both comparatively justified and impose a comparative burden, essentially saying that giving a lifelong ban to felons from being able to legally possess and purchase firearms is unconstitutional. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
This is where it gets tricky with like constitutional right and firearms. Is if I look at it like as black and white as I possibly can, especially in the mindset of an FFL, is if you have been deemed unfit or unsafe by standards beyond me, then no, I don't. There's no wiggle room in that where maybe, but if, like, where it's like, oh well, maybe if it wasn't a violent crime. No, because you have been deemed and found like guilty of a crime in which you now have this stamp on your jacket, and if that is what your actions have led you to do for whatever circumstances, then you forfeit your rights. And unfortunately, that's just the way that the cookie crumbles. It's the same thing as, I often like compare those types of situations to, like, if I run my mouth and somebody comes and punches me in the mouth, I ran my mouth, and the consequence for that is getting punched in the face.
Mm-hmm.
So if you commit a crime, are found guilty of committing crime, you forfeit your right because you chose to walk down that road. And I also, like, there's just so many situations where a felon in possession of a firearm being arrested has saved a mother or child in my direct sphere of like influence. People that I know were like, somebody was found with a gun that shouldn't have one, and they were in an abusive relationship and only were comfortable and safe enough to bring it up after that happened. Mm-hmm. So who knows where that would have gone had that not happened. So as a person, I also believe, FFL hat off, I also believe, like, no, you forfeit those rights. Unfortunately, if there was like a redeeming quality, like maybe, possibly, if you show
Well,
like 10, 12,
Matt,
13 years, but that's even pushing it.
sociology minor, we have what's called a social contract, where all of
Yeah.
us who are law-abiding, tax-paying citizens are out and about in the world, and we have a social contract of what is okay and not okay behavior. If you have a felony conviction on your criminal history, depending on what it is, I will give a little bit of leniency. But if it's somebody who's charged with like domestic battery, who's convicted of domestic battery, or who's convicted of like, you know, burglary or robbery or murder or any other violent crime that is really superseding on another person's constitutionally protected freedoms, maybe a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but you have decided and you have said enough so that it's documented in a court of law that you cannot abide by the social contract. Your social contract punishment, therefore, is that you should not be legally allowed to purchase or possess firearms. So now we're just here. We don't know what this court precedent is actually going to be. Obviously, the NRA is very busy with the state of Illinois in general. So it was just a very random, like, well, I've read some dumb things this week, Matt, but this might be, this might take the fucking cake.
That's what she said.
That is what she said.
But yeah, that is interesting, and you'll have to keep me apprised of that, because
of course
that just seems like a whole big ass can of worms that makes it really hard for a lot of people to do their jobs. And you know, for me, this isn't, like I said, this isn't a conversation about gun control or gun rights. This is simply a snapshot of information that I don't think gets talked about or looked at enough. Yeah. And I think that more than anything else, and we talked about this before we got on, I want to make the point that before we start, you know, jumping on the bandwagon of like guns this or guns that or people this or people that, a lot of these shootings happen and there was signs of, you know, the person going out to do something and people saw the signs but didn't act. Sometimes maybe acting in those situations can stop any of these gun crimes before they happen. So if you're at a loss on what side you should fall on, like me, who believes in both of these sides, I kind of fall to the, let's make sure that we're paying attention to our friends and checking in and making sure that they're all right. And if they start to seem off, you take it seriously. I look at this in the same vein I look at suicide. It's only a tragedy after it happens. Before it happens, it's, you know, a million moments of you might be able to change the direction. Maybe you can't, but you never know unless you try. So that's kind of where my head is at on this situation. But also, you know, a lot of crazy memories with gun sales and getting yelled at and people being angry and, you know, having to go hide in a gun room for like 45 minutes while this guy walks around and act like I'm not there, or act like my computer doesn't work today because I really don't trust you, dude. You can come back or you can go somewhere else because my computer's down. Sorry.
And that's what he said.
And with that, thanks for listening, especially to this episode if you made it all the way through, because this was definitely one that's a little bit different than what we normally do, but hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it gave you some perspective and something to research, because like it's school and homeroom and whatnot. Go learn something. Bye. The bell is about to ring. If you want to drop us a voice message or simply ask a question, you can do that by clicking the link in the show notes below. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. It helps more people find us. Theme music by Kinsey. More music available on Spotify. Remember, every day is a class. Go learn something.